In this tutorial, we are going to cover ACM ability to import and export identities using a CSV format. But before we get started, let's take a quick look in some of the important notes. So to perform an identity CSV export from ACM, you should have a share folder with a username and password and the proper read and write permission. This is one of the biggest things that we've seen issues with customers that's trying to export data is that they don't have the right format. So make sure that from the computer where you trying to export the data to, make sure that you have a proper folder and again the username and password so you can put that information in ACM in the CSV export functionality. To import identities using ACM CSV Import, first of all, determine all the fields that you want to import, and that could include photos and user-defined fields along with all the other fields that are present in ACM. If you're trying to import the user-defined fields, you want to make sure that first you create the user-defined fields in ACM, and then after that you could use a CSV identity export as a template. So you export that, remove all the data is in there, in that file, and that file will include columns for the newly created user-defined field. So you can go ahead and use that as your template, populating with the information that you want to import into ACM. Let's take a look in some of the prerequisites to perform this task. So we always suggest that you run the latest version on ACM. You can look into the appliance, the About tab. You will see what version you're running. And you can always download the latest version under the Avigilon website under the support section. Use a admin account to perform this task. ACM standard license as it is will include the ability to do a CSV import and export, so you're all set in there. Once again, a username and password to a share folder will be required when exporting data from ACM, when exporting identities from ACM. CSV file with the data ready to be imported. Obviously, you need to have all that ready to go if you're importing data. And all user-defined fields, as I said before, should be created prior to import this data. So on this video, we're going to start with the CSV export, and I'm going to show you how to export that. And then after that, we're going to use that export file in the next section to do the CSV import. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. I'm going to go over here into the setup and settings and go to collaborations. And then in collaborations, you're going to go and create a identity export. Okay, so it's pretty easy to create. You just go and click add collaboration. Give that a name. I'm just going to go ahead and use that identity export. Then this step where you need to select your identity CSV export. Okay, click install. And now you need to enter a proper share folder. This is the part where you also here you can choose if you want to export photos and also rows. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Here's where you're going to select your Windows share, and you have to enter the location where that where you have that folder available. So I'm going to go ahead and enter mine here. I have that by IP. You can use host name or IP address. If you're using host name, you want to make sure that in your appliance the DNS you have a DNS set up in your appliance. Otherwise, you have to use an IP address because the appliance will not have the ability just to translate the names. Okay, so 192. This is just a local computer. This is my local computer where I'm running this video that has a folder called ACM export already created. I have a read-write permission to that folder, and I'm going to go ahead and I don't need to enter domain or ports. I'm just going to go and enter my username in here, put the password, and then I'm going to go ahead and browse. If this is correct, if I have this correct, when I hit browse, this is going to go and show me the folders that are there. So you have this icon right here. You double click it and this will go and do the search. So I'm connected because it's showing already the photo folder that is inside of that. So I'm just going to go ahead and get that root right there, click close. Basically what it does, it puts a / and then hit save. All right, now that I have saved my identity export file here, I just gonna go back in here and show you how this looks like, right? So once again, you can select if you want to send it to export photos or not, if you have photos in your system. Rows, so if you have a user roles and you want to export that, you can do. I'm selecting a Windows share, and I have a shared folder that I've created in my computer, in my local computer, one that I'm running this demo. This is my IP there and the folder that I have shared, right? So you're going to put your computer IP or your network IP address for that shared location / and the share folder, okay? And then username and password that has permission to access that share folder. And I put a / because in this case, I'm running this on the root. So in other words, it's right underneath of this folder. I don't have any subfolders, okay? So I'm just gonna hit cancel. This is already set up. Oh, one more step that I did not mention. If you want to schedule this to run, that's all you have to do is just go here in this tab, and you can schedule this to run periodically, and you will put a new updated file in that location, any amount of seconds, minutes, hours, or days. So you can pick how often you want this to run, okay? So let's go ahead and take a look at it, and it's pretty easy. So once you have that, again, just click in this icon right here, and this will run the collaboration. So I'm gonna go and export all my database into that location. So it runs in here and gives you some information, and at the end is gonna show in here that you ran everything and says completed. Okay, so here it is. Stop successfully is already completed. So we can go back, and let me go ahead and show you. I already have here queued my folder. So this is the folder that I have the file created, okay? So this is the file that is created. It creates a couple of things. So if you do create if you export photos, what this is going to do is going to create this file, okay? That's where you have all the identity information. The manifest, so the manifest makes a relationship between this file and the photos, and also create the folder with those photos. And the photos are here. So these are the photos that I'm exporting. So let's take a look at the file. So here is the file that you see. So you have starting with right here is the export UUID. This export UUID, what it does, it makes the link between your between this file, the user, and the photo, right? So if you go back to that photos folder, you'll see that each photo is named with a particular long number, and that's what it is. This is how you make the link between the photos in this folder and the users on the file. Okay. So what else we have here? So external user ID, very important if you're importing, and I'm not going to cover that when we do the import part, but this is a unique field. So if you're importing data periodically, you need to have, this is a must, you need to have an external system ID. You need to have a unique identifier. So when you're importing the data, you're always importing properly. You're not duplicating records. Okay. You're going to notice that there is a couple of records of some of the users in here, and the reason why is because they have multiple credentials, multiple tokens. And so each token will generate one line entry, okay? Status here equals 1 is active. So these users are all active, with exception of this user down here, which number 2 means inactive. So when you're importing, if you don't add this field, you will import every single one as active, as equals 1. So we suggest that you do this. Just go ahead and put a number 1 in there for every single line item, and this will just bring it in without data. Type is if you want to use this type in the system. So you have some user fields that you can create and enter information as. the type of employee. Is this an employee? Is a contractor? Is a temporary employee? Whatever that is, you can utilize that, those type of fields. This right here, identity, modified time, it just keeps tracking when this record was changed. The load time is when you load this data. So if you want to put a date, if you don't, it will pick the date and time as you creating that import. And then you have all the other fields in here. I'm just going to go ahead and just comment a couple of ones in here. So here's your first name, last name, address, city, zip code, all that. So first name, last name, and external system ID are mandatory, and a few others. So keep a track of that. So external system ID, okay, first name, last name, they are mandatory, so you need to have. The other fields, if you want to enter them or not, that's fine. You can remove the column or leave it there in blank. Nothing will happen. It won't import anything. And then coming up down this side, you have just more information. So all the fields that you've seen here, they are in ACM. So if you look into ACM here under the identity, let's go ahead and pull up one of the identities, and you'll be able to see you have a relation, you can correlate with those users. So take a look here. So here's the photo, the first name, last name, title. You saw type. I showed you the type field that was employee. So this is the drop down. This is where you can go and enter different values. Also under here into user lists is where you can come in and change all these drop downs, right? So if you want to use different values, you can go in that side and just update this to have different options, okay? So everything else that you see in here, address, location, building, all this information you can import from ACM. Also the photo and also the rows and tokens. Okay, so all that you can be importing. Okay, let's go back to that file once again. So here's title, department, and so on. Rows. So here's an important part in rows. So if you're importing rows and you want to import multiple rows to an individual, make sure that you add the row followed by comma, no spaces, and then enter the next row, and so on and so forth. So here's one row, here's another one, and so on. Okay, so just make sure that you understand that. Again, enter comma, no spaces. If you're trying to import tokens, so there's a couple of things that are very important you do. So let's go ahead and move this a little bit over here. So in the tokens, there is a token unique. The system, ACM, will create this long name by default, but when you importing tokens into ACM, if you want to do that, this field is mandatory. Internal number, emboss number, and status. I'll suggest you do all this, okay? So token, unique, internal number, and emboss number can be the same. So if your token, for example, is 3,000, so you can go ahead and enter 3,000 in all three fields, okay? So, and then whenever you create new ones in ACM, they will generate its own unique number. Very important, please enter that unique number. Once again, you can enter the token unique as the same as your credential internal number, your token number, okay? And in emboss, I would suggest just use the same. The other field again is token status. Make sure that you enter status equals 1. And then the only other field I would suggest you do is this never expire. Enter the word true. So that means this card will never expire. You always can revoke the card and expire them or deactivate the token anytime you want. It's just easier for you to manage. Because if you don't, by default, the system will give you 1 year. So the card will work for 1 year, and then it will stop working. Then you will have to come back in the software and re-enable that card. So it's much easier just to say, never expire. Just put the word true in there, uppercase. And then after that, the card will remain active until you deactivate them manually. Okay. Other fields that you might be able to see here is user-defined fields. So, for example, here's an example of a license plate user-defined field that I created in this demo system, you can import data using that. So once again, if you want to import data, so if you want, for example, license plate, ACM does not have that field by default. I can go and create that as a user-defined field in ACM first. Then I can run this export file as I'm doing here right now. And then once you have that, I can clean this file or remove all the data and use this as a template to import data into ACM. It will be much easier because now you already have your user-defined fields and all the other fields with the proper name and proper location. All you have to do is just populate that. Okay? All right, let's go back to ACM now and show you once again the collaboration. So we'll go back here. So I did a export file. You saw the data is all there. You have the related photos and rows into that file. Now, if I want to do a CSV import, the process is not much different. So here's a file. Let's go ahead and use this one. By default, when you're selecting, I would suggest you use the one-time long format. And all you have to do is browse for the file. So the defaults that are coming in here, you can leave them the way it is. You just go ahead and hit that browse and go find the file that you want to import. And then don't forget to use that install, and then you import the data. So let me go ahead and show you my template, how I use my template to import data. So this is a template. Notice one thing. In this case, I don't want to import photos. In this example I'm going to follow now. So I removed that the external UUID field, the first one, I just deleted. And I'm going to keep only the fields, or I can leave this in blank, the fields that I don't want. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and get a file that has already populated these items. And when we come back, we'll just go ahead and use that file to import data into ACM. All right, let's go ahead and take a look in the file. So I just created a sample file with just 2 records, so we just can see how this will get imported. So here's what I did in this file. So external system ID, notice that the UUID that I explained before is gone. I'm not importing photos, so I'm just going to use that. I'm using a sequential number right there, just a unique number. This could be an employee number or anything that is unique that we can identify that user later on, right? So this is to prevent the system from duplicating records in case you have people with the same name, John Smith or anything like that, right? So status, I'm always using 1. In this case, I want those cards to be active. Type and then load date, I'm not going to put anything. I'm going to leave that in blank. Here are the names. And then city, none of that. I'm not entering any of that information. I am entering rows. So I'm going to give this 2 cards, there's 2 people. I'm going to give them a row that give access 24/7 for all doors, okay? And I'm also adding right here their cards. So here is the, as I described before, here's the token unique. I basically enter the same internal token number, right? So this is their credential number. I'm using that on the 3 field, the same thing in the 3 fields, okay? Token status, as I said before, equals 1. That means active. And then never expire true, so this card will be active. So, okay, file is created. I already saved this file. Let's go back to ACM and I'll try to import that, okay? All right, so here is my CSV import. I'm using the identity CSV one-time long format. So I'm going to go ahead and check that installed. And I'm going to go and browse. I'm not going to change any of that because I know by default that is the correct setting. So I'm going to go ahead and just use the identity import file I just created. Click open, save it, and now I can do a couple of things. So you will see that this is the one that I just created. I can run a preview to see if there's any issues. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. What preview does is it runs the import without adding data to the database. So it's just going to go through it, and if there is any issues with this data, you're going to see it here. So it's going to start and then it does it very quickly because I only have 2 records, so I don't see any errors, and you can see them right in here. Process 2 items, didn't add anything, did not modify anything, and most important, no errors, 0 errors. Okay, so we good there, great. So let's go ahead and run it. So CSV Import, I did a preview already, so let's go ahead and run that. Click run. It's going to take about the same amount of time. It just runs very quickly, and you can follow that underneath here. It's going to go and say run it. He's already I think he's already finished. That was very quick. So okay, let's take a look in ACM here. We're going to go in under the identities, and now I'm going to go search. I should have those 2 new identities here in the system. So here's John, and here's Jane Smith. So let's go ahead and take a look in Jane. So here's the name. Here's the unique number that we entered. Okay, no other information. I didn't add anything else. Then let's go into rows. Let's see what we add in rows. So here it is. Added this. So my system is configured where by default any new user added to the system also gets this other item, gets this other permission. So that's something that you can leverage in your system too. Okay, so you have the ability to set up in a way that you always get this as a default, or any permission you want as default, any role. So all right, let's take a look in tokens now. I don't want to save that. That's fine. So here's the token, internal number and the embossed number all there, and notice that the true here is checked, so this card will has no expiration date. Okay, that's how you do the import file. If you have any more questions, please contact our tech support. They'll be able to help you with any other details around this.